So we're outside Lambeth Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital in sort of between Clapham and Brixton in South London. I work here as a mental health advocate. I've been doing this for around 10 years in different places. As an advocate, my job is to support patients to understand their rights and to exercise the rights. So basically, I'm helping people to understand the legalities and to have a voice, to have a say, basically making sure that people are listened to. So we're separate from the mental health system. We're not part of the nursing team or the medical team in any way. So it's independent, and it gives us quite a unique perspective because we look at it from the patient's point of view. So we're there to give them a voice. So we're not offering any opinion or giving any diagnosis or telling people what to do. We're just listening to them and helping them to get their point across and to get heard. Over 10 years working in the system, I've seen a lot of things that have really shaken me, and I have to say that a lot of the people I work with, a lot of the clients will say to me that they feel the treatment is making their lives a lot worse. So a lot of people, rather than getting healed and cured, they're living their life in fear of the mental health services. Not that the services are trying to terrorise them or anything like that, but that is the outcome of how the treatment is. And the reason it's like that is it's quite simple, really. There's really a lack of options for patients. So everyone is given medication. If you don't like the medication, you'll be forced to take it in one way or another. So that could be physically actually being held down and injected with medication. That doesn't happen, as you may think, just when the person is violent and aggressive. It normally happens when a person is prescribed tablets. They don't want to take the tablets, so we put them on an injectable form that you take every 2 weeks or every month, and it slowly releases it in your body. If you disagree with taking that, they will hold you down and inject you with it. They will keep doing this until you agree to take it. So people, they're only taking it because they're terrified of being held down and injected. So physical violence is being used to coerce people into taking the medication. The other way people are forced to take it is simply by not being let out unless you take it. So it's a very unpleasant environment to be in a psychiatric hospital. As you can imagine, there's lots of distressed people. It's quite crowded. As soon as you walk through the doors, you feel the tension. It's a tense place. Even for me working there, I feel shaken just after a few hours. So imagine being there, locked up there all of the time. So it's a really unpleasant environment. So people would do anything to get out. So often they'll say, oh, we'll let you go out if you take the medication. So you'll be allowed to go out for an hour a day. So people will take it for that reason. So people are essentially being forced, even though they're physically putting it in their mouth, they're coerced, you know. And okay, you might think, well, this is it's kind of being cruel to be kind, as it's the best thing for the people to take the medication. And I think there's a public perception that mental illness is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, and if you take the pills, it fixes the chemical imbalance. And there's some people, because they're ill, they don't want to take the medication, they don't know what's good for them, and we have to force them, but it's the best thing to do. And this is, frankly, this is bullshit. I mean, no one is saying there's a chemical imbalance. Even psychiatrists will not say this anymore. Even the drug companies can't say this, because it isn't true. I mean, frankly, it's complicated. The reasons people become what we call mentally ill is very complicated. There's a lot of factors, and we don't know. So to have the only option of treatment as a chemical, it's a little scary, because these chemicals, no one would say that they're fixing or curing or anything like that. What they're doing is changing the brain chemistry, and they will stop the person having certain symptoms. So a person is hearing voices, for example, or having unusual beliefs. The medication may stop that, but it's also having a devastating effect on the body, as many of my clients have told me. So they absolutely cannot stand the way this medication makes them feel. They often put on lots of weight. They feel zombified. They've got no energy. They get very depressed. It's actually a terrifying experience. A lot of people have told me this, that it's very, very unpleasant on the mind and the body. And imagine being forced to take that, you know? So, but actually the fact of being forced to take this very disabling medication is causing people a lot of distress and anger and frustration. Unfortunately, that is seen as their mental illness a lot of the time. So it's just a lack of options. This is what gets me, because we know there are other things that work, but they don't really get offered. And I give an example. I had a client who acknowledges that she suffers from unusual states of mind, acknowledges that she has bipolar disorder, so she's sometimes very high, sometimes very low. But she does not agree with pharmaceutical drugs. She feels the pharmaceutical industry has too much influence in psychiatry, and she feels these drugs are toxic and harmful. And she's not alone in this belief. A lot of people believe this. There's a lot of research into the long-term side effects and so on. So it's not a particularly radical belief that she has. But because of that, she's locked up in there and not let go because she's refusing to take the medication, And in the end, they discharged her because there's not much else they can do. But she's not offered anything else, so there's no kind of talking therapy or social intervention to find out, why is she having these problems. It's just either take this medication that you really don't want, we'll force you to take it, or maybe we'll just give up, and do nothing. But that's basically it. You don't really get much choice. I want to say something else about the ward environment as well, because so many of my advocacy clients tell me that the way they're behaving is because of the environment. So being locked up away from your friends and family, being forced to take a medication which is causing you all sorts of side effects, it's terrifying. So because of that, the people act very strange. They'll be screaming and shouting and sort of being almost kind of hostile or angry, but they're always telling me it's because of the situation. How would you feel? But this is the situation in which the people are assessed. So their kind of anger is seen as part of their illness, and the more they complain and the more they make a fuss, the more they're seen as unwell. And it's like this kind of vicious circle. So that the more you complain, the more you're forced to stay in this terrible environment. And I think the professionals are aware of this to some degree, but it's just huge, the impact. Imagine being taken from your home and locked up somewhere like that. It's enormous, what it's going to do to you. If it happened to anyone, it would cause a lot of distress. But the people it's somehow in that world that they're being assessed as mentally ill. And that it's
How
also
many people do you see that are on a section rather than that might actually be a voluntary patient? Do you ever see any voluntary patients?
So most of the people there are on section, so they're legally not allowed to leave. You can also be there as a voluntary patient, which means essentially you can come and go freely. However, a lot of the voluntary patients are only there as voluntary patients because they're told, if you don't come in, we're going to section you. And they're often told, if you try to leave, we're going to section you. So basically they're sectioned, but without having any legal rights.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of the people who are voluntary, it's not really that voluntary. Mm-hmm. And this is from the point of view of the professionals, they say, well, we don't want to section the person, we don't want to put them through all of that. But if you're there informally and voluntarily, you should be allowed to come and go, so please. But a lot of people can't. Just going back to the environment. So, for the patients, there's not very much to do on the ward. It's a very distressing environment. There's alarms going off. There's fights breaking out. There's all sorts of, very uncomfortable things all of the time. And then you only get to meet the doctor, the person in charge of your care, just once a week. Sometimes for only a few minutes. And this meeting is very important because it gets decided what medication you're going to take, if you're going to be allowed out or not, when you're going to get discharged. All of this stuff is decided in this one sort of high pressure meeting once a week. And what I've seen as an advocate, I see people, when they're with me before the meeting, they're quite calm and we're having kind of an ordinary conversation. You get them into this meeting full of professionals and they start acting really strange, because they're frightened. It's very high pressure. You're being basically analysed. The people have enormous power over you and they're making decisions that are going to affect your future. Like, are you going to be allowed out? Are we going to hold you down and inject you or something? It's very high pressure meeting. So the people in that meeting, they tend to act in a distressed way, and that is seen as evidence that they're unwell and they end up spending longer in hospital. So again, it's that catch-22 situation. If you go onto a psychiatric ward, it's, in my experience, 10 years experience in a lot of different hospitals, it's very similar. You go onto the ward, there'll be a staff office, often with window so the staff can look out and see the patients. And you will always find a bunch of very distressed patients hanging around outside the staff room door, knocking on the door asking for help. So asking when they can be let out, when they can get their phone charged, can they use a computer, just stuff that we take for granted. They're trying to get this sorted out. And you will find you knock on the door, a lot of the time the staff, they don't even look up. They're so used to patients knocking on the door. Even today, I saw there was a patient banging on the window trying to get the staff's attention, and I heard one staff member say to the other, "Oh, just ignore him. Ignore him, he does this all the time." And that's kind of what it's like. So there's all these distressed people trying to get help, but the staff are very busy with their paperwork. They're also, they have a very tough time as well. I have to say, they have a very tough time. They're overburdened. But it's just basically, it's a very terrifying experience. You've been locked up in this place. People who are supposed to be helping you often ignoring you, or they're just policing you, telling you what to do, take this pill.
It also makes people more distressed
when
they're being ignored, or if they're actually crying out and people are ignoring them. It makes the situation worse, and it escalates situations as well. Or if someone's starting to get agitated, if they're ignored, they'll get more agitated.
Yeah, in my experience, there's nothing that makes a person more angry, a distressed person, than being ignored. I mean, when you're in that kind of state, what you really need is to be heard by another human being, whatever it is. And people they're ignored and silenced in a lot of ways. So one way to silence the person is to say, well, whatever you're doing and saying, it's not real, it's a result of your illness. So that's a way of silencing a person. It makes the person much more frustrating. Another way is just simply not to respond. So like I said, the person's knocking on the door and no one's looking up. And this is enraging patients, So then they start kind of acting in a more, loud and distressed way. And again, that's seen as more evidence of the illness. And it's this catch-22 scenario. You often hear stories about someone who stopped taking their medication. I mean, an extreme example, some horrible incident happened, it's because someone stopped taking their medication. You hear it a lot, The person stops taking the medication, they relapse. But what you don't hear is that these medications change your brain chemistry. So if you're taking this medication for a long time and then you stop, you have a withdrawal effect. And basically that can cause all of the symptoms of mental illness. So you stop taking the medication, you can start having all sorts of side effects that can land you back in hospital. What I've seen is these effects are normally seen as the person's illness coming back. So look, you stopped taking your medication, your illness has come back. This proves that you need medication. But what if that person had never got the medication in the first place? What if they've been treated in a different way? Their brains wouldn't have become used to the medication, they wouldn't become dependent on it, and they wouldn't get all these effects when they stopped taking it. So I think it's a little unfair to put all the burden onto the patient to say, oh, look what happens, you stop taking your medication. Because these medications cause serious withdrawal effects when you stop taking them. And that mimics mental illness. So even if you took an ordinary person and put them on this drug for a long time, and then suddenly stopped it, they will start having unusual side effects. But there's been a load of research to back this up. A lot of people I work with will have this experience as well, and they feel so terrible from the medication. They stop taking it, and then within a month or so, they start having all these unusual experiences. And of course, the professionals say, well, look what happened. You stopped taking your medication, we're going to keep you in hospital.
But even some of it which they may not have experienced before as well, isn't it?
So it happens a lot that people are on these medications. They've not been offered any other type of treatment. They put on this medication for a long time. It's making them feel terrible. So they will stop taking it. Then they'll end up back in hospital again. Professionals will say, look, your illness has come back, you need the medication. Maybe the next time in hospital they'll even be more coercive, they'll keep them in there for longer, they will put them on an injectable form and threaten to hold them down if they don't take it. But it's kind of unfair to put all the blame onto the patient for stopping the medication, because the very process of coming off medication can cause all sorts of symptoms to come up. And this, people are not told is when you're put on medication, you're not told this medication will cause withdrawal effects when you stop. They don't use the word addictive, but it's the same thing as an addictive drug. It's like your brain chemistry changes from taking it. When you stop taking it, there's going to be consequences. And I think people should be told this at least before they're put on medication. They should be told, A, about the long-term side effects, because there are lots of long-term side effects, which no one is told about. B, they should be told about the withdrawal effects. I would want to know, if I'm taking a medication, I want to know if I'm going to be physically dependent on this or not. And I think it's sad where a lot of young people, their first time in the system, and they're put on the medication. I think at least patients should know that there are withdrawal effects and long-term side effects. And people should be given other options. Because a lot of the problem, the clients I work with, because they're only offered this one option to take this very powerful chemical that causes all these side effects, they end up in a fight with mental health services. They end up being forced into having treatment. This is hugely disempowering, it's humiliating, and it stops them getting any real help. So you've got this cycle of people coming in and out of hospital, because they're only given one option, and it's an option that they can't tolerate. If it was the case that the illness was caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain that's fixed with the medication, then it would make sense. It would make sense to force people. But it's not the case, and no one can argue that it is. I would suggest people to research this, because it just doesn't work that way. What I would love to see as an advocate is options for people who do not want to take medication. There's a lot of people like that, and they have good reasons. They have good reasons for not wanting to take it. It causes all sorts of horrible effects, and there's long-term consequences. So it's not just that it's because they're unwell, they don't know what's good for them, and they're not taking their medication. They have really good reasons to not take it. All of the people I work with, so many of them, they're only taking the medication because they're frightened of being taken back to hospital, or they're frightened of being held down and injected, or they're frightened of not being let out. So they're not taking it because, I've realised I'm unwell, I need medication. They're taking it because this is the way to get them off your back and to be left alone, and not to be physically held down and injected or kept in this very unpleasant environment. And almost everyone, I think, it's very rare, I have to say, it's very rare that I've met people who have told me, oh yes, I really like taking this medication, it's really helping with my illness. Almost everyone I work with is taking it out of fear of the consequences. And I think that's terrible. I think people are already suffering, they're traumatized, they're going through a lot. And then to coerce and force these people to take powerful chemicals, there must be another way to help all of these distressed people. There must be. And it would be so much more pleasant for me to work within a system where the professionals and the patients are on the same page. There'll be a kind of mutual healing. But what you often get is just a battle. It's professionals just battling to get people to take this medication. People doing anything to avoid it. People options. For people who decline medication, give them options to heal and recover. Don't just force them and alienate them from services, because then more terrible things will happen. We always hear these stories of someone came off medication and they murdered someone. What if the person had been offered real care? What if they'd been offered some type of healing and therapy and something like that, rather than this coercive treatment they're trying to run away from?
Do they offer anything like CBT?
Yeah, so there's talking therapies are offered, and it has got better. And there's also OT, so there's occupational therapy, helping people to get back into work, helping people to learn how to cook and things like this, life skills, and there's yoga classes, and there's really good people working in the system. But all of this stuff is seen as a kind of afterthought. So like the medication is the treatment, that's the thing that works, and the other stuff is kind of like an add-on. So for the person refusing medication, it's not like they're going to get OT instead and they're going to get psychotherapy instead. That they're going to be coerced and forced until they take the medication, or they're going to be kind of dropped from services. It can't be right that the care people are offered is something that they're terrified of and spend their whole time trying to get away from. It's not working.